So you are one creative, one iconic creative that we connected with at a glance. I don't want to read from here. I just want to say from my heart. Okay, so how you thrive as a pathfinder, paving the way for other creatives, how you shine a light in dark places. Can you please share some highlights of how you began your journey as a creative?
I think when it comes to like story, there is, me being a creative in the literal sense of it, and then there's me being a creative in, I guess, the professional sense of things. In the literal sense of things, I think, from when I was a child, I think I've always been a creative. I've always been a creative child, from like how elaborate like my coloring used to be in like my coloring books, to how, I would spend a bit too much time trying to ponder like the meaning of like, like a word, like why did this writer choose this word instead of like another word. Like I was always trying to understand, like the mechanics like behind even like other creatives that I was inspired by. So I was very much involved in the creative process right from when I was very young. But then I think when I started to like, hone it as a craft was in university. This was in 2017. I had just started my second year of university in January of 2017, and I think that that year came with a wave of like New Year resolutions, and one of the New Year resolutions I had at that time was to just write more. And I did exactly that. I wrote more. I was writing on Medium. I was writing on LinkedIn, to the point where I became the first African LinkedIn campus editor. And I just wanted to write a lot, right? And I wanted to have like a creative like discipline that was a craft for me. But then I think when I started to pursue it professionally was when I joined the team at Nasty Boy, as managing editor. So a Nasty Boy is well, he actually is Nigeria's first LGBTQ plus publication. Was founded in 2017. So I came on board in 2020 as managing editor, and I think for me, like that was the moment where I felt like, okay, I'm actually one foot in the creative world, and like that felt nice. And because it just felt like I was like doing something I was always like kind of just, I don't know, supposed to do. And like it has now continued and progressed to the creation of Kenga, and the creative process slash journey for me, I guess, just continues.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. I think that there's just one thing that somehow binds all creatives that we have in common. I think for most creatives, it began from childhood days. There was an Italian painter that we interviewed, and she said her own was not just childhood. Her own was when she was a baby. Like when she hears music, she stops crying as a baby. Like she would cry and stuff like that. She was like already attracted to paintings and drawings even as a baby. So I feel like we all have that story about our childhood connected to our creativity. Yeah, so how was growing up like? Speaking about childhood.
So I grew up in a rather musical home, in the sense that my mom was in the choir for a bit. I was, a struggling singer. My sister, was a singer as well. But like I think the creativity and the music in the home weren't as formative to like the creative person that I am, as much as the challenges that I went through. Just growing up in Nigeria as a closeted gay man at the time, and like I think just all of that, and and everything that it taught me about you know concealing myself and immersing myself in like like just more visually appealing spaces. I was the one male kid who was obsessing about cosmopolitan magazines and Vogue, right? And because I found a bit of myself in those pages, right? Because in like the rest of like my Nigerian community, like I didn't think there was a space for gay men like me, right? But then in the pages of these magazines that pushed more liberal ideas, I found a reflection of myself that was free of all of like the limitations that that I had as just like this tiny gay boy in Nigeria. And I think like all of that and like like the things that those magazines that I read while growing up did for me is like what I'm trying to also do with Kenga. So with all our issues, we are pushing we're pushing the boundaries on conversations. We're reaching into like the fringes of culture, like these and like amplifying like these identities that society would rather prefer to ignore, showcasing like the spectrum of things in like in conversations where the world would prefer we see things as binary, right? That's really what we want to do, like with every issue that we do, that we create at Kenga. So our like a little boy or a little or a little girl in like whatever like town, like like on the continent, who ends up seeing like that magazine, and there's something about themselves that they might be shy about, or like they might think that there isn't a space for like that kind of expression. I want them to be able to find that in the pages of Kenga, right? So like for them to now live like the like like that like that experience that that I had just flipping through those pages as as a young boy, but then now like with an even better reality where the people inside this magazine are people who look like them, because that was something I struggled with as well, like when I was reading Vogue and Cosmopolitan. Like these magazines were great, but like it still felt rather distant in the sense that these were people who didn't look like me. They didn't come from my background. So, in as much as their stories were inspiring, they weren't quite relatable, right? So, what we want to create like with Kenga is a content that is both inspiring and relatable, so they can see themselves literally in the pages of the magazine. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's inspiring on its own. What does art mean to you? Like as a person, what do you think art means to you?
Yeah, so like I think my definition might actually be considered rather basic, but I think that's generally how I think about it. I think about art as any creative expression of like our stories and just like our identities, like who we are or where we've come from. Any creative expression of any of those things for me is art. This can manifest through song, this can manifest through writing, this can manifest through even like you said, like football, right? Football itself is an art. Like the people who are really into the sport, I am not, but the people who are really into the sport, like would like would have conversations, or yeah, I'm at length about the art of football, right? And like, and because like these, because like the players who end up getting to like the global peak are people who are not just playing for like a career. Like they, like there's a bit of themselves, there's a bit of their story that's weaved into like that pursuit of like building this career and like this field, right? So then that's also where a lot of the ambition comes from. Like they're literally putting themselves into their craft, into their work. Like a lot of the best songs, a lot of the best books, a lot of the best like creative work that we can think about, like a lot of the best art in general, are, like things where like the creator literally poured themselves into their work, right? So that's how we think about art. Like whatever, anything that is a creative expression of our identities or our story.
Yeah, that's it exactly. You just said it, you just hit the nail on the head. So as creatives are wonderful people. I think that's just the word that's coming to my mouth, my head now. Different creatives. I've spoken with 1,001 creatives, and they all have this dream life. Like personally, I have a dream life as a creative. We are like very unique people at all. So as a creative, what's your dream life?
My dream life. I think my
What's
dream life
that
is,
you look forward to, right? Is not yet a reality now. Maybe it's just like a dream, like what you hope to like start living or stuff. Anything.
yeah, I think I like as a creative, I like what I'd want is to see like a world where like the work I did like shapes a generation. Like because like when you think about, like MTV have done for global youth culture, it's incredible. From, from as early as like the 70s and like the 80s. What,
Sorry, we didn't
what
get the last few words.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, my internet has begun. Okay, so I think yeah, so I think I'll take that again. So like I think what I hope to create, or like what I envision as a creative is a reality where work that I've done or work I've put out helps shape a generation. In the same way that platforms like MTV, Vogue continue to do that, right? Because like when you think about MTV as and yeah, as an example, and what that platform has done for like global youth culture over like several decades is just so incredible, right? A lot of people grew up on MTV, right? A lot of people, like, their ideas, their opinions, their entertainment interests were shaped by MTV, right? The fact that we even live in a more liberal world is because of the content on MTV, because MTV just pushed like content that just made everyone just feel like they were all in this together, right? And like I want to create something like that. Like I want to create work like that. So work that doesn't just have meaning, and it doesn't just sell for an incredible amount, but it actually has impact. Like it actually changes culture, it changes a generation. That's I think that's the pinnacle of just being a creative for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So this time around, I would quote word for word because I was blown away personally when I saw this. When we dug into your some of your posts and we saw this, and all of us were blown away. Like, so I'll just read it word for word. It was actually longer than this, and maybe after the interview, I'll share that with you. Because we hope to use those same words, but give you all the credit. Use those same words for the project we are working on. So it says, you said it won't be easy, but never stop practicing. Mastery doesn't happen to you, you earn it. So you posted this a few years back, and it's really highly inspiring and most needed in the creative industry because just talking from experience is most needed. Sometimes we just give up too easily or before time because especially in this part of the world, the creative industry is something that is just coming up. The creative path is not yet a professional. Our parents or the older generation do not really see it as a professional path. So it's very easy to give up when you do not really put your mind and heart and all to it. So you said this during a performance, a TEDx stage, a TEDx performance, and can you please share the highlights of this experience? Like from the performance to what something would have really triggered this that made you think this deeply about this whole staying consistent and practicing and all.
Right. Yeah, no, like I think that quote was just more so about like just what went into preparing for that performance, because I think that performance was in July. And at the beginning of the year, I had never played a piano in my life. I had challenged myself to, learn how to play the piano and like perform an original song. Um, because like I think I was invited to perform on a TEDx stage, and I was given the option to either do a cover of an original song, so cover of an existing song, or perform an original song. So I wanted to challenge myself to, one, write a song from start to finish, and then also in the process teach myself how to at least like play the piano enough to play and sing at the same time on stage of my like my like my own song. And it was a very painful process. A lot of you were annoyed during the process. And these were most most specifically my neighbors who, like in the middle of the night would be, woken up by me just playing the piano and playing the same chords over and over again in a loop, like I'm a crazy person. But like just that whole process of like just trying to master that craft, at least like enough to be able to like perform, like in the way that I wanted to. It was challenging. It was, you know, everything that I didn't want it to be. But the end result was great. I performed like the song, I played the piano and sang on stage. Ended the performance with and received a standing ovation from the audience, and it was just like a fulfilling moment for me because it wasn't really about the performance itself. It was about everything else that went into it, and I think for me, it just felt like that was an ovation that I had earned. Like it wasn't just about yeah, it felt like I had achieved like the mastery that I wanted to. And like from all of that, like the lesson that I learned was that mastery is something that doesn't just fall on your lap. It's something that you actually have to work to earn.
Hmm. Yeah. So now I'm even more stunned because I was even thinking like you were already playing the keyboard before that time. So you just learned it that period, right?
Oh
You just
yes.
learned.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, Maureen, please remind me to come back to this after the interview process. Just remind me. There's something I would share with you that I would want to work on. Um, okay, so do you feel creative? Yeah. Do you feel creatives in the developed countries at advantage to those in the developing countries?
I do think they have an advantage, and that is one of the things that I want to also just use my lifetime to fix. One of the things that I've set out to do, just God giving me life, is to create, like a school for the creative arts, in Africa, because when you look at, countries like the States, if you're a music prodigy, there's a lot of schools that you can go to from even when you're like 6. You can go to Juilliard, you can go to the Berkeley College of Music, and there's a variety of others, right? But then here, best case scenario, you'll be sent to church, like to go and learn like with the drummer in church, or go and learn with the piano guy in church. We don't actually have like creative institutions that train African creatives on their craft. Even with music, right? When you think about, just what, when you look at the work of like people like, Wizkid and so on, and like just like a lot of like, the popular musicians that have come out of the continent, especially in Nigeria. When you look at how a lot of them found themselves in music, it was very accidental. Like they hadn't like they weren't like training, like they weren't training as musicians from when they were children in the way that people like Beyonce was, right? So when you see the levels that Beyonce is able to reach in her career, it's not necessarily that she's just more talented. She was also just more privileged because of the species that she was in, right? She, like she was in, she was surrounded by, a system that allowed her to train, and from when she was a child. Even when we look at our film industry, like a lot of the actors just find themselves in acting because like they graduated, they finished their NYC, they like they it's either they couldn't find a job or they found a job, they were dissatisfied, now switched and now found themselves, tada, I'm an actor, right? And then when we now start to critique some of the acting styles in like the in like in Nigerian movies or in African movies and so on, it's because our actors are not as trained as the people on the other side of the hemisphere, right? So it's not necessarily because like we aren't as talented. So yes, I do think we are held back, right? And the creatives in other parts of the world, like in the developed world more specifically, they are definitely more advantaged. But then like we just need to now start to now reverse engineer like why are they more advantaged, and then how can we now create some of these advantages for ourselves on the continent, like rather than just realize that we're at a disadvantage, and then just sit back and just okay, cool, like we know, like we need to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, seriously. And I feel like in every question you are answering, like you sincerely have many things in we sincerely have many things in common. I mean, Hello Icon magazine and everything you're saying as an individual. And I'm sure that's the same thing that Kenga magazine reflects. So that's so great. That's really great. It just feels good when you know that whatever you're working towards, like you're not alone. You also have people that are working towards that goal. It also makes it feel light and makes you know that the impact is going to spread and also thanks again and again for all you do. Kenga magazine thrives in its uniqueness, beauty, and style. I like to see things that are away from the usual. So yeah, Kenga Magazine is one platform that does that in a very unique way. We believe its impact is one that would stay evergreen. Can you share the inspiration behind the name Kenga and what you consider most fulfilling about your journey as CEO and publisher of Kenga Magazine?
Yeah, so the name um Kenga is actually inspired by Ikenga, which is a
Oh,
horned deity in Igbo tradition. I'm like in the Igbo culture. I'm Igbo myself. So growing up, one of my favorite books was Hour of God by Chinua Achebe. And there he referenced, like, there was a lot of talk about Ikengas and what they signify. And I was just very fascinated by like an Ikenga and just everything that it represents. So I think, like when my co-founder and I were thinking about a name for the magazine, we naturally, like we came up with so many ideas. But then, like, I think my mind just somehow just went back to this name, right? Because I think what the Ikenga symbolizes, is like is something that we wanted Kenga to be and like to and become, not when it's completely built, but even right from the very beginning, right? And what an Ikenga symbolizes is influence and the pursuit of greatness. It's an embodiment of like the belief that everyone has the ability to create their own greatness, and that's something that is at the core of what we believe at Kenga, that we truly have in our hands like the power to create like a publication and a company that will truly be great. And even if we as a company die trying, we would inspire like another generation of people that would go on to complete what we may not have been able to finish. And then I guess to the second part of your question, what it has been like being CEO and publisher of Kenga, it has been a lot. It has been a lot. I wouldn't lie. It has been a learning journey in the sense that even though I have been a creative, I hadn't really learned enough about the business of the creative world until I became CEO of Kenga. So then it now felt like I was learning about the business of media while being in media. So I think just having to create content while learning about the business at the same time and trying to monetize like the content and just doing all of that at once was overwhelming, right? And I think even just leading a team and leading different groups of people, and as you said, creatives are very interesting groups of people. I had never worked with as many like creatives like before I stepped into this role, right? Because even with like a Nasty Boy, we're a very small team of like 4 or 5, and we were just like running our digital site. But then in this case, for each issue, we're collaborating with at least 50 different creatives to put together the issue. Before this, I was working at Facebook as a designer, right? So I'm more familiar with the corporate world and just like that side of things. And just making the decision to step into like the creative world. This was in January of last year. I was 23, just very excited. I was like, okay, cool, let me just do something that is different and like challenging. I ended up challenging myself, and like from having done that, I've learned so much about running a business, about the business of media, about people, right, and about business itself. So it's been a learning journey, rough, but very, 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 very rewarding and very worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I don't know. Let me not just create more conversations, but seriously, most of the conversations here lead to so many other conversations. But the most important thing is I connect to everything and I can relate to everything you said about putting a team together, about sometimes being overwhelmed and all. So that's great. But the most important thing, like the last question or the second to the last question, was the fact that you still stay consistent and you still keep doing what you're doing. I think that's where passion comes in as a drive to keep doing what you're doing. Um, so this one is also a very delicate question because it has to do with mental health. As creatives, we understand the high tendencies of getting stressed out, even while pursuing our passion. So that we are pursuing our passion doesn't mean that sometimes we won't be overwhelmed, like what you just said. I'm glad every question, every answer leads to the next question. And yeah, so we are humans too. There are moments we get overwhelmed. Like some people may say, "Ah, I thought you say writing is your passion. Why do you still feel tired?" And no, let me just leave myself out. But I'm a workaholic, and so I feel like I can relate to the stress part. And then there are days when even depression may creep in just that inexplicable way. There are days you feel just overwhelmed. There are days that just feel very overwhelming. Do you have any relatable experience to this? If so, how are you able to manage and thrive beyond phases like this? Any quick tips on mental health? I know the question is so many in one, but just do it. Just express yourself in how best suits you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to mental health, it's something that is very, very, very important, and especially for creatives, because I think for us, we are working literally, I would say, at the brink of sanity, right? Because I think for like a lot of people that are pushing the boundaries on like art, to do that, you have to almost touch madness a bit, right? And when you think of like some of the most creative people in the world, they are in varying degrees insane. You know, think of Kanye, think of Beyonce, you know, think of Rihanna. You have to be, there is a craziness to it, and that's just the craft. Now the industry itself is also very unforgiving, in the sense that like your creative output is not just, you know, a commodity that is, that is supposed to serve like a purpose and people just buy it. It's also like from the moment you release it, you open yourself up to um you know reviews and like criticism that in some cases you didn't ask for, right? And for a lot of creatives who put a lot of themselves into their work, that can be very difficult to like grapple with, right? Like when you've poured yourself into this art piece that that you've created, and then you've put it out there in a bid to just just get more visibility and potentially sell the thing that you've created, and then people are just like bashing your work and so on. But then it's the subjectivity of like the industry also just makes it hard, because now you're criticized for like your work, and now you're struggling to even make a sale because you're criticized for your work. But then it's honestly just a lot, right? So like I think for creatives who who are looking to protect like their mental health, it's very, very important to surround yourself with the right kinds of like energy. That is something that like I'm very intentional about, and like with like every person that is in my space, like I always just make sure that like there are people who are pouring into me, or like at least just keeping me sane, right? If I realize that there's something or someone in my space, or like in like my area, that is like triggering me, I would make a mental note of that. If I can correct it or fix it, then I would. If I can't, then I'll just remove myself from the situation, right? And in some cases, this might mean walking out of a really good deal because you feel like this other person that you're trying to work with is just not bringing the fire to it as much as you want to. Or let's say like you've sold something to someone, or yeah, or let's say you sold something to someone like on credit, and like you're now being gas lit, because this is something that happens a lot, like in the creative world. Like as I speak to artists, I speak to writers and so on who are commissioned for pieces, like this, like like this is something that is just very rampant. And I think also because of how finances work in the creative world, where lots of creatives get paid per project. They aren't like salaried employees that have guaranteed income. There's the hypertension that comes with, damn, like when is my next pay going to come, right? But then if you surround yourself like with the kinds of people who can comfort you, who can be there for you, who can encourage you when you're down, that's really all you need. Just like that really good support group, like that tribe around you. Because I think like without my tribe, I don't know how I'd have gone through like the past year.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the biggest things. Kind of people we surround ourselves with as creatives. Very important. Personally, I did a research in 2020. There was a time when in Nigeria, the rate of suicide cases for creatives was just increasing. Just very close to me, I know a poet that committed suicide. I know about two. I know so many creatives at that point were just in online, and so I did a little research on creatives and mental health, and I discovered that like it's scientifically proven, like you said, every creative that is really thriving has this little madness in one way or the other. Or maybe they may say, okay, this person is strange or weird, that kind of thing. I don't think there will be very few creatives that they've not called weird in one way or the other, because there's something unique or different they always like to do in their own way. So in that research, I discovered that there's a connection between creativity and the part, okay, mental health and creativity. That's why I studied so many very very notable poets, because that was my field. That's my field rather. Studied many of them, very renowned ones, and some of them still died of suicide and all. But that's not the case of why. That's not the case now. But just trying to share that creativity has like the creative part of the brain has this connection with mental health, mental stability, and all. So creatives really need to like you said, surround ourselves with people that push us to positivity, that gives us peace. There's nothing like peace. I do not trade my peace for anything. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now moving to our next question. Balancing work time, rest time is a struggle for most creatives. It has to do with the stress part. Please, can you share any tips on how you balance work time, rest time, and family time? I think you are big on family, because I when we're trying to like get more on your background, we saw so many things on family and all. So how do you like create time, and as a CEO and publisher, you also have so many things to do. How do you create time for rest? How do you create time for rest, work time, and how do you differentiate this and make sure everything has a balance in the end?
So it's really it's and I would say, sorry, I'll be lying if I was to say that I completely have a balance, because in some, like I not sometimes, like a lot of times things seep into each other. But I think like it's it's a thing where I'm constantly attempting to make things balanced. And in my attempt, the ideal that I'm striving towards is one that is a very strict um 888 kind of day. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for play, 8 hours for rest. That's why we have 24 hours in a day, right? So be very strict about like demarcating within these 8 hours I'm doing nothing but work. Within these other 8 hours I'm doing absolutely nothing but nothing, right? In these other 8 hours I'm doing nothing else but sleeping, right? And just being very strict with that. Like I think that is the ideal that I'm striving to create. I'm not quite there yet, but that's like that's more so what I'm working towards.
Yeah, yeah, I really get that. What does success mean to you?
Whew, this is a deep one. I think success honestly so I think what success means to me is one, being happy, being surrounded by love, and being able to afford the things that you want, right? I think a lot of times when we think about success, we imagine people in like people with like lots of like the glamorous things in life, but it's really not about that. We forget that it's possible to be completely successful, and you're living on $5 a day, right? It that that isn't like that's possible. With everything that you need within that budget, and you don't feel like you need anything more, and you feel like you're happy in life, you're surrounded by people that you love, like your family, you're surrounded by kids that you love, like parents that you love, friends that you love, and like you're happy, and that to me is success, right? But then like that's on a broad human level, right? And I think for me, like my definition of success for like Arinze is what I described at the beginning. Like I want my work to, influence a generation. That's that's what I would count as like a successful life for me. It's not about the money. It's not about, how much do people know my name. It's about the work I did, the thing I did with my life. To what extent did that help shape other lives? That's really what a successful life looks like to me.
Yeah, that's great. That's inspiring. The second to the last but not the least, let's go a little poetic. If poetry is a rainbow and you have a choice of one color in that palette, what would that be and why? What color would that be and why?
I'd say yellow. Yellow is the color on the rainbow that is somewhere around the middle. It's one of the first colors that you notice on the rainbow, actually. Very few people are able to see the red because the red, actually, at least in the sky, usually fades, like
Mm,
fades out. Like you see the green very prominently, like you see but then what the color that actually gives it that feeling of, this is actually light is yellow, right? Because like yellow in itself is a color that pops. It's central, like it illuminates all the other colors around it, right? And that's really what I want to be. Like I want to be that, person that illuminates, other people and other lives like around me. Like from the person that I am, from the work that I do, I help make other people's lives better and happier and, just less stressful. Because
yeah,
life is hard. Like we cannot just like, like we should like what it should mean to be human, considering how stressful it is, should be, just to use your own life to just help make other lives better.
yeah. That's amazing. That's awesome. There's a project I was working. Sorry, I'm talking about personal stuff, but it's part of this. There's a project I was working on, and I just always ask myself. So many organizations, very UNESCO, all the big organizations, they were always striving towards making the world a better place. But I just feel like the answer is in us being better people. Like just the little things, like life is already difficult, but sometimes I feel like we make it more difficult for ourselves. There are a million and one ways that we can be better people, and life will just turn around 360-degree and be better itself. So I can really relate to what you said about just making life easier for one person out there, two people out there. And I like to say that impact is not just like when you've impacted a million and one persons. If it's just one person you make smile every day, you make life better for him or for the individual, then that's it already. So I'm so happy, I'm so excited. I'm sorry I didn't tell you this is recorded. So our team members will see it when they are doing the transcription, and will be very, I'm sure they'll be as happy as I am, because there are some people that when you, after the interview, you're even more excited because they are even beyond what you see online, because you're happy that you didn't make a mistake. There's nothing like we've never made a mistake. Everyone we've interviewed have been awesome, but like we're really happy that this person is actually the person we saw, and even beyond, like can totally relate to everything you're saying. Thank you so much, Arinze, for being so inspiring. Then this is the last but not the least. Please can you share something that we do not know about Arinze Obiezue? Please, did I get that right? Can you please pronounce
Yes.
the surname? Obie
Oh no, it's fine. Arinze Obiezue.
Obie. Okay.
Obviously. Yeah. Yeah, no. So I think something you may not know about me is I'm 25% Jamaican. My grandmother is Jamaican. My mom's mom is Jamaican.
Wow. Wow. That's a huge one. Never have guessed.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah, so I'm like properly like African and Caribbean.